so much for the Chamber of Commerce, the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce and the Latino Chamber of Commerce for having me to talk about this very, very important topic on how to effectively homeschool your child and how to support his or her learning during COVID-19 and beyond. So my name is Layla. I'm the founder of College Advising Prep. I've been in education for 18 years and doing everything you possibly think of under the sun when it comes to the umbrella of education. So I'm extremely, extremely passionate and believe in the power of education to transform lives. And so with me, I also have Ravin, who is going to be presenting some portion of it as well and sharing some strategies to help you parents become effective become effective teachers as well. So I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Ravin. Do you guys see me? Okay.
We do hear you, and we hear a little bit of an echo, just FYI.
Oh, all right. Hi, I'm Ravin Nhem, and I am the manager of tutoring services. And I'm really excited to be here right now. So a little bit about myself. I went to San Jose State University. I got my bachelor's degree. And just like Layla, I got my bachelor's degree in health science. And as Layla, I'm very passionate teaching, and I've been in the education field for about 5 years. So for 2 years, I've been working with children 6 to 15 years old at the Boys and Girls Club. And what I did was I helped foster their youth development by encouragement and by talking to them. And I also currently working for Morgan Autism Center right now for 3 years. So what I do is that I evaluate and assess the behavior of the autistic child, and which is amazing working with autistic kids. So yeah, and I love what I do, and I just really do love what I do, and I'm just really happy to be here.
So we're very, very passionate about education, as you can tell. Very passionate, and I'm sure you are as well. So thank you again for joining. As we can tell by your presence that you do value education and you want to help your child be able to get the best quality education, provide that support as we are sheltering in place. So one of the first things that I want to talk about, and this is so critical. I'm sure there's a lot of funny memes out there that you probably have seen where parents are, having the color-coded like schedule, and then you see the video of them tossing it out the window. So yes, it's a good effort, but really with scheduling, what I would suggest is to keep it very, very simple and to involve the student in that process as well. So very important to write a schedule step by step as to how your session is going to look like, and involve the child with the scheduling as well. So that way he or she has the proper expectation on how long each session is going to be. So if you have a session that's devoted to, 30 minutes to science, the child understands that after 30 minutes, that session will come to an end and they will move on to another activity, whether that be another academic activity or whether that be a preferred activity where they can actually pick one that's purely fun. Another thing that I recommend is having the student cross out the tasks. So I do this with my students now. Whenever we complete something, I have them check mark it. So I give them a little, marker, and then they check mark each activity. So this is certainly a boost of confidence for the student because now they see, I just finished this task and now I'm ready to move on to the next task. So very, very important to make sure that the schedule, keep it simple, involve the students, and make sure that they are able to tick off some of the tasks so that way they know that they're moving along and that they get a sense of accomplishment. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is setting proper rule and expectation and the boundaries as well. So once you go over the schedule, make sure that the student, your child, has the proper expectation. So that way there's clear boundaries, and this should come right after the scheduling as well. So some of the things that you should consider, very basic things that I go over with students that a lot of teachers in the classroom will go over students is we use our ears to listen. So I'll say, what do we use? We use our ears for listening. We look with our eyes. So a lot of teachers will say, you know, when the student is not focused, 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, 1, 2, 3 eyes on you. So reinforcing those rules. And then of course, when the teacher is talking, so at home, you are the teacher. So when you are talking, we have quiet mouths. And so there's that level of respect and there's that clear understanding as to what they must do in order to be able to be a great student. Um, you know, how we sit on the carpet, that's very important as well. Crisscross applesauce or sitting in a chair, you know, using your words to articulate what, you know, each child needs. And then of course, cleaning up. So teaching them that responsibility that they must clean up after every single session, making sure that their workspace is neat and nice. Okay, so very, very important that those rules are established and that those boundaries are established and set right from the get-go. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is incorporating breaks, and this is very critical, not just for the students, because as you know, when they get a little cranky sometimes when they need breaks, but also for you as a homeschool teacher as well. You know, children can get frustrated and overwhelmed, so can the parents as well, especially if the parent is working at home on top of trying to be a homeschool teacher. So this incorporating breaks is very critical. It helps the child to reset his or her thought. It gives you a little bit of a breather as well, and it keeps the child engaged and ready to work when the session is ready to begin again. So if you don't have the necessary breaks, then this child can break down, lose focus, refuse to do the work, and then it just becomes very overwhelming and very frustrating for both parties. So breaks is a must. Okay. I also use a timer. So I'll use a timer. You can use a timer on your phone. So that way there's clear expectation how long the break is. And I will communicate, okay, so we're done with this session. We get a 5-minute break. And I have a little hourglass timer that I will actually have the student flip over. So that way they see it and they're like, oh, okay. So now they know that break time is over when the sun goes down or when the beeper goes off on your timer. Okay, so whichever you prefer, but just use something so that way the student understand or the child understand that break time is over. Now it's time to be able to go back to work. Okay, so very critical, very important. The next thing I want to talk about is creating the optimal learning environment. So this is your home and environment is very important. The great news is that you absolutely have the power, the ability to manipulate the environment that's going to be conducive to your child's learning. Okay, so some of the things that you want to think about is there a dedicated workspace? Does the child have a desk? Does the child have a computer if they need a computer? Does the child have consistent internet access? Okay, so having a dedicated workspace is very critical because then when the child is there, they know that that is the time for them to work. You know, some parents like to conduct classes at the kitchen table, and that's completely as fine as well, as long as that becomes the dedicated workspace that is, you know, dedicated for the child's learning. Okay. Another thing to consider is, do you need a whiteboard? Do you need a blackboard? Do you need cabinets? Do you need bookshelves to store the materials? Basket works perfectly. I use basket for prizes to put away, you know, gadgets and so forth for students. So things of that nature will be very important to make sure it's a clean, dedicated workspace that is very conducive to their learning, that is going to help them get the biggest advantage to be able to propel in their academic career. So just remember, it is your home, you're the homeschool teacher, you have the power to manipulate that environment that's going to be beneficial and crucial for your child's success. So we do know as teachers that sometimes it's not the environment. So teaching is just ongoing learning about how can I effectively teach my child, or how can I effectively teach the student? So as teacher, you may need to, from time to time, if it's not the environment, to approach the situation differently, to see what else or how else you can tweak your learning to be able to be most effective for your child. Okay. So one of the things, and this seems so simple, but it's so crucial to their benefit, is to teach to their interests. So if your child, for example, is curious, loves science, but hates writing, why do you want to fight with your child to force them to write? Why not incorporate their preferences into your session? So I have a student who is very inquisitive, curious about how the world works, just absolutely curious. She loves science, but hates writing. And so what do? We do simple science experiments, and she writes lab reports. So it gives her an opportunity to perfect the skills or develop the skills that she needs. And she's not fighting me because she enjoys it. So very important, you know, when the child is having fun, when they are enjoying, when they're much more engaged, learning is much more fun, and learning is easier for them to retain the information, and when they're engaged, they learn it at a deeper level, and they don't realize they're learning because they're having so much fun. So very important to teach to their interests. Okay. So the next thing that I really want to talk about is some learning differences. And, you know, lots of students have some difficulties where as a teacher, you have to really assess to see what is most appropriate for those students. So you want to look at the student's strengths, really it helps to identify their strengths. Look at the path of least resistance. So I gave you earlier the example of the student who loves science, who loves experiment and hates writing. And that was the path of least resistance for her because she loves science. She loves it. She's very inquisitive. And so when we do science experiment, I can incorporate writing activities into it. And therefore, it helps to strengthen that area of weakness for that child who is struggling as a writer, okay? So I'm gonna talk about some common learning differences and some techniques to really help you be able to help your child become much better and in their academics, and much better students as well. So ADHD is a very common one. This is attention deficiency, hyperactivity. So this is quite common, you know, in attention, where students have a short attention span. So some of the technique that's very beneficial is circling back. Okay, so I call that manufacturing tangent. So going off to on a tangent and then circling back to the activity. So it could be something simple as talking to them about maybe something that they may be interested, just for a brief moment, just kind of going off on a tangent. So that way, and then bringing back that focus to the task at hand. Okay, relating the subject back to their interests. So for example, if the students, you know, don't like writing is a very common one, writing, math, and reading, right? A very common subject that students may not be interested in. So relating that to what they may be interested in. So I'll give you another example. I had a student who hates writing again, and we, you know, didn't want to focus on it, but she loves, you know, her favorite show is Henry Danger. I don't know if any parents know that show. I didn't know that show until she and I started working together. But she just absolutely love it and can recite every single word, you know, in the show. So that was something that she was passionate about. She was interested, and so, but she didn't have much interest in writing anything else. So we work on, you know, helping her to develop her writing by doing scripts, and she's very creative. So that worked perfectly as far as helping her build that skill, but looking at the path of least resistance and circling back to like what the student's interested in. Another one is breaking up work into like smaller manageable chunks. Okay, so if you have this big math problem, for example, and it's complicated, And so if the students don't enjoy math, they're not going to want to do it, right? So why fight them? Let's break up the work into smaller pieces so students can do each step and complete it and understand it and have a finished product and be able to solve that math problem, okay? And then varying your teaching style that is going to be most beneficial to the students as well, okay? So this is another very common learning difference. This is for students who have impaired calculation, and then these students may have difficulties for understanding numbers, manipulating numbers, learning and memorizing math facts. So what I typically do with the students and what I would recommend is using manipulatives. So if the student is struggling with for example, subtraction, subtraction of complicated numbers, having to borrow. So using manipulative will actually help them to be able to understand and clearly understand it a little bit better instead of having to abstractly understand it on a worksheet, which tends to be a little bit boring for a lot of students. I like the thought approach, the thought process approach as well, because it helps the students articulate every single step that they're taking to complete a problem. This not only allows them to articulate it so that way they show you they understand it, but this also allows you to be able to understand their thought process and help them to correct any errors in place, and helps you to identify maybe incorrect thought process as they're solving that problem, so you're able to address it. Repetition works perfectly because they get many opportunities, and you're creating a lot of opportunities for them to be able to develop that skill set much more so. And like I mentioned earlier, breaking up works into multiple steps works perfectly for this learning difficulties as well, because they're able to complete every single step that might be a little bit more manageable, might be easier for them to do, and it helps them, be linear in terms of what needs to be completed in order for them to get to the final answer. Okay. The next one that I want to talk about is dyslexia. This is quite common as well. So students who have dyslexia has some problem with processing speed. Reading becomes very challenging. They have difficulties with phonics and phonics awareness. They have difficulties as far as memory and recalling information as well. So some technique is oral and visual, because they have difficulty. The words are all scrambled. So oral, being able to speak, being able to teach using visualization is very beneficial. I would switch off with students. Sometimes I will read and we review and have the student teach back the concept to help them reinforce what it is that they're learning. Audiobooks is perfect. There's so many YouTubes where people are reading. You can purchase audiobooks for very cheap on Amazon. So it's very, those are much more beneficial to really help students with this learning difficulties. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn over to Ravin, my manager of tutoring services, and she's gonna talk about how to manage some of those unwanted behavior that your students or your child may exhibit as they're learning.
Hi, everybody. One second. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about AIR. AIR is a method that I use and many teachers use. What it does is that it manages unwanted behaviors. So AI stands for actively ignoring the behavior, and then R is redirecting it, and then re-engaging back to the behavior, back to the child. So I'll be talking about the first one, which is actively ignoring the behavior. Okay, so what happened is that you want to actually ignore the behavior because the individual is, so you want to actually ignore behavior because, I'm sorry. So you want to actually ignore the behavior because the more you react to the child, the more the child will react to you. So there's some things that you could do that, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So, perfect. Okay, so managing unwanted behavior. So this is very critical. You know, as far as being able to uh, help students, you know, not exhibit the unwanted behavior, the undesirable behavior. And so this can occur from students who are seeking attention. They may act out and they may think that, oh, because I am acting out, I get the attention from my parents. So therefore, I'm going to do it again because it worked the first time. And so I am going to do this again. And then it creates this cycle, right? This vicious cycle as far as, you know, acting out, getting the attention, and then it works, and then acting out, getting attention, and it works again. Uh, and this is very hard. This is very hard to do. Believe me, when a child is acting out, especially if they're causing you pain, it is hard. It's very impossible to say, you know, try to refrain from not giving any reaction, from not having any expression on your face. You know, you naturally want to say, ouch, that hurts, or why would you do that? But, you know, that actually feeds into them getting the attention. So that could be from attention seeking, but it could also be from having to escape from having to do work. Sometimes they don't want to do the work, so therefore they know that if they act out, you're going to just focus on what they're doing versus the work that they have to do. Kids are smart, all right? So very difficult, but, you know, very important that you have to be strong, you have to be persistent, and you have to be consistent. So if it works one time, trust me, and I'm sure you've already experienced this, they will try again, right? So that's only the first step, is to actively ignore the behavior. The next step is redirecting it. So we want to redirect it, and this happens right after you ignore the undesirable behavior. Okay, so this should happen right away. Now, I listed several different strategies. It's not a comprehensive list, but in the 18 years that I've been working with students, these are the list that the strategies and approaches that works very well in almost every single case. So the goal of redirecting is to get the student who is exhibiting this unwanted behavior, who is not focused, who is not working at the task at hand. The goal is to redirect the student to be able to focus, being able to work on what it is that they are working on. Okay, so some common approach would be distracting the child, or creating that time or that space for the child as well. So this could be something as simple as, hey, let's take a quick walk, let's take a quick break, and then bringing them back to the task at hand. So very, very important. This is something that is used a lot within the school. Okay, another strategy or another approach would be to teach a replacement skill, such as if the child is screaming because he wants someone's attention, because he or she is having difficulties as far as articulating their needs. A better, you know, skill might be teaching them how to appropriately do that, whether it's tapping someone to get their attention, or being able to help them articulate what it is that the child may need. Another approach that's very common is interest boosting. Okay, so what this is, let's say a child is not focused, but you know, they may be interested in cars, or maybe, you know, they're doodling on their worksheet of something, right? And so you go up to the child and you're like, wow, that is a beautiful drawing, what is that? And then the child is, you know, so excited to tell you what it is that he's drawing, right? Which is completely not focused on the task at hand. But now you're able to engage in a brief conversation about it, and then now you can actually go ahead and say, okay, well, that's beautiful, that's great, well, let's go ahead and get back to the task at hand. And now the child is actually going to be at a better state as far as wanting to get back to completing the task that they have in front of them. Another approach that's really popular and very effective is name dropping. So a lot of families have, multiple kids at home. And they're studying at the dinner table, or they're studying, in whatever workspace that you've created for your children. And so name dropping is, oh, so and so is doing such a great job as far as working on their worksheet, or as far as working on a particular problem and so forth. So name dropping the behavior that you're trying to get your child to do, or get your other child to do, is quite effective. And praising specific behavior is also very effective as well. So if your child is doing a great job as far as listening, or with the ears, you can say, great job. I mean, you are doing such a phenomenal job listening with your ears, or like looking at me with your eyes. Now let's go ahead and work on the task at hand. So redirecting them to be able to work on whatever task that they have in front of them. Okay. All right, so this comes right after redirection. So getting the child to be redirected toward a task and getting them to be re-engaged. So, so when the child is calm, re-engage them to complete the current task. However, sometimes, one approach may not be the effective one for the child. So if the undesirable behavior is still there and the child is not ready to work, you repeat the process using one of the other approaches to tailor it specifically to that child. But the error method is a method that teachers have used for many years and have found to be successful. So it does work, but there's a lot of different approaches underneath each one. And sometimes when the child is emotional, letting the child know that you care about their emotional state is something as simple as, tell me how you feel. And letting the child articulate how they feel, especially during this stressful time. I mean, COVID-19, we're indoors, we're limited activity outdoors. They're not able to see their friends. They're not able to see their teacher. So you can imagine how a child feels a lot of mixed emotions. So giving them the opportunity to articulate how they're feeling, and acknowledging, to letting them know that you do in fact care for them, and of course you do, that you care about how they're feeling, that their emotional state, and you want them to be able to be in a happier state and really focus on what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Okay. So we know that when it comes to being, a great student, being able to help them as much as you possibly can to be an effective homeschool teacher, this also means incorporating self-care into the curriculum. So that means hygiene, proper hygiene. We do a lot of experiments helping students understand the importance of hygiene, understanding hand washing. I'm sure you've probably seen those experiments floating around where people would take pepper and they would take water and dip soap, and then the pepper just completely dispersed to the other side. And using something like that to explain the importance of proper hygiene to your child will help them to understand the importance of it, right? Because if a child is sick, then they're not going to be productive. And the same goes for you as the homeschool teacher, is when you're not feeling well, you're not going to be productive as a homeschool teacher. You're not going to be able to give the best care and the best support for your child's learning as well. So very important that self-care is incorporated, not just for you, but also something that you practice as well, with your child. Okay. Healthy and nutritious diets, obviously that's really important. That's something that should be incorporated into the curriculum, into the homeschool curriculum, as you're helping them through, learning at home. Plenty of vegetables, fruits, proteins. We need a lot of nutrients in order to be able to be alert, to be able to be focused. If we're worried about our tummy and our tummy's growling, we're not going to be focused. And that, that's true for kids, that's true for adults. So very important that we get the healthy and nutritious diet to sustain ourselves The last thing that I want to talk about is physical activity. So it's a little tough now that we're stuck indoors, but activity, the 30 minutes of activity is so critical to helping them with memory, being able to restore or store a lot of different information, being able to help them be alert and be focused. It's so critical. And there's a lot of different things that they can do indoors and even a quick walk outdoor as well. I like to incorporate exercise or physical activity into the actual curriculum. So for example, if I'm teaching a child phonics, we will do like a freeze and dance. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's really simple. So when you hear something that like the not the buzzword, then you are free to dance as your little heart desires. But then if you hear something that is the buzzword, so for example, if I do phonics and we're practicing the digraph ph, that says f. So if the child hears f, then they have to freeze. So very, very simple things that you can actually incorporate, so that way they get their daily exercise, they get to be active, even if it's indoors, and then they are actually having fun because they're not really, thinking that they're learning, but at the same time they are learning and they're still being active, and they're getting a lot of that energy, the pent-up energy from being indoors out as well. So mindfulness is another one that I really, really think is so important. It's a buzzword right now. I'm sure you've heard mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. It's very critical, and mindfulness really helps to cultivate a child's creativity. It helps to cultivate and boost their self-esteem. It helps them to understand their emotions, so they're not screaming when they're frustrated, and then you're ready to scream too because you're frustrated with them. So it's really critical for them and also for you as well. And so, I've done with little ones, I've done where we turn off the lights for a little bit. We sit on the carpet, crisscross applesauce. We have our hands on our thighs or our knees, and we take little breaths. So we take a deep breath with our nose through our nose, and then we let out through our mouths. And I like to incorporate little mantras that I have students repeat. I will do little mantras like, I love myself. I am so smart. I'm very clever. I'm very friendly. I love my family. I love my friend. So little mantras like that. And you can think about what is going to be best for your child. But little mantras like that will be so helpful as far as their development, their self-esteem, and so much more. You'll certainly see it when they're frustrated and they're actually able to understand their emotion, being able to communicate that with you. And so it's all around a great benefit. I with older kids, and I've done this actually at the university when I was teaching at one of the universities. With the older kids, I would do like a little check-in, and what that is just an emotional check-in. And students would tell me how they're feeling, how their day's going. They'll articulate that. And so we just kind of do what's around robin. So everybody who's in the class, if you have multiple children, this is great. You're able to have each child articulate maybe their emotional state, maybe how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and you do a round robin with that. So it helps them to be able to, again, be mindful, be able to understand their emotion, being able to articulate that, creating that support, that supportive environment, right? So it naturally builds that support because they're sharing that emotion. So, when we're sharing our emotion, it's really sensitive. It's really personal to us, right? So if we feel comfortable enough to be able to share that, with others, even including family, then it allows us to be able to, feel okay to be vulnerable. And so that naturally creates that supportive environment that you will like. So that's an activity that I've done with, um, university kids. I call them kids, university students, and it works really well. And you could even do a checkout, and I've done that as well, where at the end of the session or at the end of the class or at the end of the day, you do a checkout. You kind of check on them again, see how they're feeling, how they're doing with that day's activity. So very critical, very important, because an all-around happy child is going to be a much more productive one. So very key things to consider when we are wanting to be effective homeschool teachers. Okay, so that's all that I have. I hope that you got a lot of great information. I hope you take the information and you go back and you just kill it in your classroom, your home, and that you help your child be able to fill in some of the learning gaps because of COVID-19 and because we're having to teach at home and they're having to learn from the online and making that transition so swiftly as well. So at this point in time, I'm happy to take any question if there are any as well. And then also I'm happy to send the PowerPoint for any of parents who would like to be able to have their hands on the PowerPoint as well.
Cheryl?
Well, I just wanted to say that was a great presentation. And I will definitely use some of the techniques with my 9-month-old grandson. And I would just love if you could just do a quick little demo of the dance thing so I can do it with him.
You dance on camera. So students love this, and I'll get up here. Okay, so and you can do any type of dancing you want. So there's no specific dance. So have the child be creative. You know, you can even play music in the background. So I'll do music in the background. And so if there's phonics, like I said, I use this a lot for phonics because, you know, reading and math and writing, those are just very key areas that seem to be a struggle for a lot of children. So you can play music and then they could just dance and just really get into it. Of course, you have to get into it too. So you can do all kinds of funny moves. And then you'll throw out that buzzword or whatever it is that you're trying to teach, and then they just freeze. I mean, that's as simple as that. And whoever is the last person wins. And you could even throw a prize in there or, you know, just laughs for laughs. So it's a really fun activity. It's simple. There's not a lot of thought, a lot of preparation that goes into it. So it's quite effective. And you can just
I think just making it fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say one thing and then I'm going to get off. I want to thank you very much. I hope we can do this again because I really would love to market this to my daughter and her friends who all have children right now. And I know they're going crazy.
Oh, I know.
And that's a perfect demographic. And I just wanted to say that Ravin, is that how I pronounce her name? Yes. I hope she'll not be, you know, nervous. You know, when I started Zoom, I was so nervous. Seriously, it took me several times to kind of, you know,
get the hang of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell her, you know, we're all friends here. This is what we're trying to do, is allow people to speak so that they can practice and just get better and better. Yeah. There's no judgment. There's, you know, it really is, you know, a way for us to learn about you. And so no judgment.
I did have a question regarding one of the techniques that you mentioned, which was name dropping.
Uh-huh.
I wonder, do you think that children would maybe compare themselves with that other person that maybe is doing so well? I sometimes wonder when you have multiple children and you
Mm-hmm.
and you say, you know, your brother is doing so well in this area, and then they may think that that child is the favorite child as opposed to.
Yeah, so it's when I say name dropping, it's not comparing. So you're whatever, let's say for example, if you have 3 children there and they're, you know, in different grades and then focus on different things. So you're saying, great job, so and so, you're working so hard on that problem. So you're not comparing a child to another child, because that will certainly hurt their self-esteem, especially if they're constantly hearing that, or things get reinforced, which will certainly affect them. So it's not comparing the child, but it's reinforcing the positive behavior. And that's why I said that, we're trying to get rid of unwanted, undesirable behavior, whether it's not being focused, whether it's, screaming and things of that nature. So you're just reinforcing the positive behavior, but not comparing aptitude, which can hurt their self-esteem.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And yes, the presentation will be great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can certainly